Once upon a time, middle-class households made up 65% of the U.S. population. Today, the middle class is not only a minority, but it also lost ground financially. This is just one of the cold, hard facts that you will learn in this video. At this point, we all know that the American middle class has been in a steady decline. Our incomes are shrinking, our net worth is going down, and yet the cost of living just keeps going higher and higher. Right now, millions of small business owners and entrepreneurs are being strangled out of existence by mountains of red tape and excessive taxation, while millions of middle-class jobs have been shipped out of the country to other nations where it's legal to pay extremely low wages. Unfortunately, the American dream is now dying in plain sight, but most Americans don't seem to care. What in the world is it going to take for people to finally wake up and start taking action? Maybe some of these numbers serve as a wake-up call. Before checking this list, please support us by leaving a thumbs up in this video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, here are 20 stunning pieces of evidence that show the middle class in America is dying. 1. Today, nearly half of all families in the United States live below 250% of the federal poverty level. This means that 1 in 5 American working-age families with children lives in poverty, according to data compiled by the Hamilton Project. Federal poverty thresholds vary by family size and composition, meaning that families with the same income but with different household compositions can be in different positions relative to the poverty level. For instance, for a family with 2 adults, 2 children, the federal poverty level is $23,283, and 250% of the FPL would be around $58,208. These families' proximity to the poverty line means that any unanticipated downturns in income could push them into poverty. For this reason, 20% of these families are classified as the struggling lower middle class. In essence, this means that roughly half of American families either live in poverty or in the struggling lower middle class. 2. The study also revealed that nearly 1 out of 2 struggling lower middle class households is headed by an adult who has attended college. In other words, 48% of lower middle class family heads have a bachelor's degree or higher, but still face major financial setbacks. 3. Considering that the cost of getting a college degree is up more than 1,000% since 1978, it's comprehensible why so many middle-class households are financially hurting. According to Bloomberg, today more people are saddled with more student loan debt and despite being more educated, earned 20% less in 2021 than boomers did at their age in 1989, and that's adjusted for inflation. 4. On average, middle-class Americans owe $43,217 in student loan debt. A study published by Dartmouth College highlighted that in total, households with income over $74,000 hold $1.26 trillion in student loan debt. The study also found that students from middle-class backgrounds have higher student loan debts than those from either lower or higher income backgrounds. Dartmouth sociology professor Jason Houle, who conducted the study, said students just beyond typical financial aid cutoffs are saddled with a disproportionate amount of student loan debt. The research revealed that middle-income students typically had 59% more debt than the average borrower. The most shocking statistic of the study is that students from upper-income families had 240% less debt than lower-income students. 5. About a third of struggling lower middle class families rely on income support from a government program. Approximately 33% of families with incomes between $70,000 to $156,000 depend on at least one government transfer program for income support. SNAP is by far the most prevalent transfer program for middle-class Americans, with 21% of these families, or approximately 2.4 million households, depending on SNAP for food assistance at some point during the year. 6. Roughly 40% of children in the struggling lower middle class experience food insecurity or obesity, or both. Unfortunately, children in the struggling lower middle class more closely resemble children in poverty than they do children in higher income groups. More than 24% of children, or approximately 1.7 million children in the struggling lower middle class, are food insecure, and approximately 23% are obese. Almost 7% of these children simultaneously face both obesity and food insecurity. In stark contrast, 85% of children living in upper-income households face neither challenge. These numbers highlight the diverging nutritional conditions of children by socioeconomic status. 7. More than one-third, or 34%, of middle-class families can't cover a $400 emergency expense, according to a new study from the Urban Institute. Their experience of financial insecurity underscores their financial fragility in a slowing economy, the researchers noted. We were certainly surprised by the percentage of families, especially moderate-income families, that are struggling with financial insecurity, they wrote. There are rising healthcare costs and housing costs. All those things present challenges for families, even middle-income families. As incomes have stagnated, the building blocks of a stable middle-class living have steadily become more expensive, they continued, adding that healthcare, childcare, and education are a few of the fundamental but increasingly unaffordable pillars of the American dream. 8. Another surprising finding in the Urban Institute data is that almost one-third of families with two working adults struggled with material hardship in the past 12 months, such as failing to make a mortgage or rent payment. 9. In fact, a Pew Research survey released on June 6th found that 93% of middle-class Americans are worried about the rampant cost of living. The report noted that the middle-class status no longer offers the security it once did, which is why so many households are struggling with the impacts of recent inflation and the rising costs of housing, medical care, and education over the longer term. 10. The U.S. middle class has been falling behind financially since the turn of the century. When adjusted for inflation, in 2022, the median income of middle-class households is 4.6% less than it was in 2000. Moreover, because of the housing market crisis and the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009, their median wealth, assets minus debts, fell by 28% from 2001 to 2019. 11. New data from the Pew Research Center also pointed out that the middle class is no longer the country's economic majority in the United States. After more than 4 decades of being the largest economic group, the American middle class is now matched in number by those in the economic tiers above and below it. In 1971, fully 61% of households were in that middle range of income. By 2022, only 49% remained. In early 2021, 120.8 million adults were in middle-income households, compared with 121.3 million in lower and upper-income households combined, a demographic shift that signaled a tipping point. The share of people living in the upper-income tier rose from 14% to 22% over the same period. Meanwhile, the share in the lower income tier increased from 25% to 29%. 12. Automation is one of the main reasons why so many middle-class jobs have disappeared since the 1980s. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, between 50% and 70% of middle-class job losses since the 1980s are linked to pay declines in industries experiencing rapid automation. The so-called task displacement has been particularly high for middle-income Americans who also saw their real wages fall the most. 13. Outsourcing has contributed to the decline in the number of manufacturing jobs too. In the past 10 years, more than 5 million manufacturing jobs have been shipped overseas. Since then, working in manufacturing, which used to pay well even without a college degree, has been overtaken by working service jobs, most of which are low-paying, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Right now, manufacturing's share of the U.S. economy is at an all-time low, and formerly great manufacturing cities have seen their economies sharply collapse in the past decade as well. 14. At the same time, the gig economy has exploded, giving workers more job opportunities to choose from, but fewer benefits or legal protections. These types of jobs do not typically come with health insurance, retirement benefits, etc., and so this is something that our nation is going to have to wrestle with. On average, gig workers earn 58% less than full-time employees, and more than half don't have access to employer-provided benefits. Today, 36% of U.S. workers participate in the gig economy, either through their primary or secondary jobs. 15. On the other hand, the decline of small businesses and entrepreneurship in America has significantly accelerated over the past couple of years. Working for yourself or starting a business have always been ways to lift yourself up into the middle class in this country, but today it's harder than ever to become independent. Government regulations, rules, and taxes are absolutely killing millions of small businesses that have been struggling to survive since the pandemic. In April, the number of self-employed Americans dropped to the lowest level in 10 years. At 8.22 million, it marked a 12.29% year-over-year decrease, and the first time the number of self-employed workers in the U.S. fell below 9 million since 2011. Traditionally, entrepreneurship has been one of the engines that have fueled the growth of the middle class in the United States. But today, the level of entrepreneurship in this country is sitting at an all-time low. 16. As home prices hit stratospheric levels, middle-class Americans are seeing the most slip in home ownership rates ever recorded. In 2010, 78% of homeowners were in the middle class. By 2021, that number dropped to 70%. On the flip side, the share of homeowners who are considered high income rose from 16.4% in 2010 to 29.8% in 2021. 17. According to a recent report from the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University, 21.2% of homeowners and 46.3% of renters in the United States are either moderately or severely burdened by housing costs, defined as spending more than 30% or more than 50% of their income on housing, respectively. Nationwide, 24.5% of middle-class households spend over 30% of their income on housing. Using data from the JCHS report, researchers found that households with incomes between $74,000 and $128,000 are priced out in 73 of the country's top 100 most popular housing markets. 18. Meanwhile, as home and rent affordability worsens, housing advocates estimate that around 200,000 families are currently unsheltered and living in their cars, many of which belong or used to be part of the middle income group. According to estimates published by the Washington Post, the number of people residing in campers and other vehicles surged 46% over the past year, even though the practice is illegal in many U.S. cities. 19. The average monthly expenses for American households are $5,111. That's according to the most recent Consumer Expenditure Survey from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. In 2019, the average monthly expenses were only $3,300. Housing is the largest average cost at roughly $1,784 per month, making up 35% of typical spending. Moreover, Americans spend $610 on food per month. Transportation costs more than many realize, $819 per month, largely due to rising fuel prices. And as of March 2022, the average healthcare spending hit $431 per month. And 20. As we're forced to spend a larger share of our incomes just to make ends meet, we're left with almost no money to set aside. Last month, the U.S. savings rate hit the lowest level since 2008, falling to 4.4%. As a comparison, during the same period in 2020, the savings rate hit a record 33.8%. In a typical cycle, a sharp drop in the saving rate would be a warning sign about the sustainability of spending. Wells Fargo economists, led by Tim Quinlan, wrote in a note published earlier this week. Well, until we start doing things differently, we will continue to get the same results, and the middle class will just get increasingly smaller. Over the past decade, middle-class households have officially become an economic minority in this country. How much worse do things have to get before we say enough is enough? Are we just going to stand on the sidelines and watch the middle class disappear entirely? We have to remember that this is our future. This is the future of our children and of our grandchildren. This is the future of our nation. And we have to stand up for ourselves because our standard of living is being destroyed. And we're doing nothing to prevent that from happening.